My cheek burned from the slap, but the sting was nothing compared to the weight of the stares around the table. Forks hovered mid-air, glasses paused at lips, conversations cut short. The heavy silence pressed down, thick with confusion and curiosity. Vivian's glare sliced through me like a blade. Her fingers trembled, whether from anger or something else I couldn't tell. I looked at Elena, expecting shock, concern, anything, but she just sat there, motionless, her expression unreadable. What the hell was that for? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Vivian's lips curled in disgust. You know exactly why. I didn't. At least I didn't think I did. But there was something in her tone, an unshakable certainty, that made my stomach twist. Did she know? Number impossible. There was no way. Vivian, Elena said softly, finally breaking her silence. What's going on? Her mother exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. Not now. The room was still. No one spoke, but everyone watched, waiting. Lillian, Elena's younger sister, sat across from me, eyes locked on mine, a knowing smirk playing at the edges of her lips. A smirk no one else seemed to notice. She knew. Heat crept up my neck. My pulse pounded. I forced myself to look away. Vivian rose abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me. Without another glance, she strode out of the dining room, leaving behind an air of unease. Elena turned to me. What happened? I ran a hand through my hair, forcing a casual shrug. I have no idea. A lie. Her gaze lingered as if searching for cracks in my answer. You must have done something. The accusation stung, but I swallowed my anger. I barely touched her. Lillian's voice chimed in, sweet and amused. Technically, you did bump into her. Maybe she doesn't like to be touched. I glanced at her, but she just sipped her wine, eyes dancing with mischief. This wasn't over. The crisp night air cooled the heat rising in my chest, but it did nothing to silence the storm brewing in my mind. Vivian's slap lingered, not just on my skin, but in the way the entire family had looked at me, like I was already guilty. I gripped the balcony railing, staring down at the twinkling city below. The world kept moving, indifferent to my unraveling secrets. The sound of soft footsteps behind me made my spine stiffen. You should be more careful, Lillian murmured, her voice carrying the same teasing lilt as before. I turned to face her. The moonlight bathed her in silver, highlighting the smirk playing on her lips. She was beautiful, in the way temptation always is, dangerous, reckless, irresistible. Careful of what? I asked, keeping my tone even. She stepped closer, the silk of her dress brushing against my arm. Secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. My jaw tightened. And what exactly do you think you know? She reached up, trailing a single finger down my chest. My pulse quickened despite myself. Relax, she whispered. Your sins are safe with me. Every muscle in my body tensed. Lillian was playing a game, but I wasn't sure what the rules were. Does Vivian suspect? My voice came out lower than I intended. She tilted her head, pretending to consider. She doesn't have proof. But a woman like her doesn't need proof. She just needs a feeling. And you, her lips curled, you make it so easy to suspect. Anger flared in my chest, not at her, but at myself. Had I really been that careless? You enjoy this, don't you? I said. Lillian took another step forward, until the space between us was nearly non-existent. I enjoy watching things fall apart, she admitted, voice honeyed with amusement. I should have walked away. I should have told her to stop. Instead, I stood there, letting her push me closer to the edge of something I wasn't sure I could come back from. Behind us, the sound of heels clicking against marble made us both freeze. Elena? Lillian was gone before my wife stepped onto the balcony, slipping into the shadows like she had never been there at all. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the city. You've been distant. The weight of her words pressed against my chest. I forced myself to meet her gaze. Work's been demanding. A lie. She nodded slowly, but the sadness in her eyes told me she didn't believe it. Come to bed. I hesitated. That was my mistake. For a moment, something broke in her expression before she turned away. Good night, she whispered. The guilt was suffocating, but not enough to stop me from thinking about the woman who had just disappeared into the night, Lillian, and the fire she had just set between us. Morning arrived with an unsettling stillness. Sunlight seeped through the curtains, illuminating the empty space beside me. Elena was gone. I exhaled, rubbing my temples, the weight of last night pressing down hard. The moment my feet touched the cold floor, I knew I had to be careful. Vivian's slap had been a warning, but Lillian's words haunted me more. She was playing a dangerous game, and I was trapped in it. Downstairs, the rich aroma of coffee filled the air. At the breakfast table, Vivian sat with a porcelain cup in her hands, nails tapping against the surface. She didn't acknowledge me when I entered. Instead, she took a slow sip before finally speaking. "Sleep well." I met her gaze, ignoring the underlying venom in her tone. "I've had better nights," she smirked. "I imagine so." I pulled out a chair, deciding not to dance around it anymore. "Do you want to tell me why you hit me last night?" Vivian set her cup down with a soft clink. "You deserve worse." Frustration tightened my jaw. "For what?" Her eyes studied me, cold and unrelenting. A mother knows when something is wrong. Elena may be blind, but I am not. There it was. I held my ground, forcing a casual chuckle. "You're mistaken." Vivian leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You reek of guilt." Before I could respond, Lillian entered the room, draped in silk, her bare feet padding against the marble floor. "Morning," she purred, her voice dripping with amusement. Vivian's jaw tightened. "Stay away from him." Lillian smirked, pouring herself coffee as if the warning was nothing more than background noise. "Why, Mother?" "Afraid he'll like me better?" I stiffened. Vivian's face hardened. "You will not destroy this family." Lillian took a slow sip, then licked a stray drop from her lips. Too late. The weight of those words settled between us like a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea how long I had before it detonated. The walls were closing in, secrets pressed against my skin, suffocating, tightening like a noose. Vivian's suspicions, Elena's distant gaze, and Lillian's dangerous games. Everything was unraveling too fast. That night, the house was eerily silent. The air hummed with an unspoken tension. I found Elena in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "Talk to me," I said, stepping closer. She lifted her gaze, and for the first time I saw it. Doubt, fear, heartbreak. "Are you in love with someone else?" My pulse pounded. "Why would you ask that?" Her lip trembled. "Because I know, I just don't want to believe it." I swallowed hard. "Elena." The door burst open. Vivian stood there, face carved in fury. And behind her, Lillian. "You disgusting bastard," Vivian spat. Elena stood abruptly. "Mom." "What?" Vivian threw a phone onto the bed. The screen was lit, a message thread open. My messages, my words, my betrayal in black and white. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lillian folded her arms, expression unreadable. "Oops," she murmured. Elena grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled. Her breath hitched. "No!" My world shattered as tears welled in her eyes. "You cheated on me." Her voice cracked, pain dripping from every word. I opened my mouth, but no excuse could fix this. Vivian turned to Lillian. "With her?" "Your wife's own sister," Elena gasped, stumbling backward. Lillian only smiled. "Tell her," Vivian hissed at me. "Tell her how you betrayed your vows, How you threw away 15 years of marriage for a selfish, reckless fling. Elena's face crumpled. How long? My throat tightened. 6 months. She let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. 6 months, and I never saw it. Tears streamed down her face. You were my husband, she whispered. My everything. I stepped forward, desperate. Elena, She flinched. Don't touch me. Lillian watched it all, unbothered. You knew, Elena choked, turning to her sister. You knew what this would do to me. Lillian's smirk finally faded. For a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Regret? Or was it satisfaction? Vivian grabbed my arm. Get out! Elena! Out! Vivian shoved me toward the door. Elena didn't look at me. Lillian turned away. And as I walked out of the house, leaving behind the wreckage of my choices, I realized I had lost everything.